Yep, we can see that full screen. And Dr. Kirschenbaum, before I keep forgetting, so if everyone who's attending and watching this live, and if you're watching this on demand, you will get a CME credit, an AMA PRA Category 1 credit via your reflection. So once this is done, I'm going to email everybody a link. You click the link, you spend 30 seconds just writing what you learned, and you'll be able to get one AMA PRA Category 1 CME credit. That's courtesy of our partner platform, CMFI. All right, Dr. Kirschenbaum, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks. The good news for everybody is that you can't see me, but the good news really is that I only have 3 slides. They sort of describe a framework that I think people have to look at when they're in an employed environment. I've been here 15 years and I have only lost 1 attending to not liking the work environment, and the rest were were for the geographic reasons. So we have a great retention rate here at this hospital. So I'm going to start with the top. These are my core 5. This is my table of the core 5 of how to thrive in hospital employment. How to thrive, which means you're surviving. And right on the top, you really need to know. Yeah.
Dr. Kirschenbaum, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just in case you needed it for your presentation, I figured out how to enable your video. So you can turn your video on now. There we go. See, and you know, I know that you're looking for this amazing virtual background. You're like, damn it, Omar, now I can't show this virtual background, but we fixed it. I'm so glad we fixed it. All right.
Everybody wants to work. Okay.
There we go. There we go. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that everyone saw me, bye. Okay. So the first thing, the most important thing is really know the mission, know your hospital's mission. I mean, you could be a hospital employee at the Mayo Clinic. You could be a hospital employee at a Tenet or an HCA hospital, very different mission. You could be an employee at a city hospital, whether it's New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, a county hospital, but you need to know the hospital mission, what it's all about. Because if you're not in line with where the hospital wants to go, where the hospital needs to go, you will be a fish out of water in that situation. It will be an absolute nightmare for you because you're going to want to go left all the time. And the hospital, by definition, since it's their hospital, they're going right. And you got to know, is their mission to take care of this community? Is their mission like the Columbia HCA? Yes, we're taking care of communities, but we have to make a profit. Is it a private equity owned hospital? You know, is it, you know, a community hospital? Are you a tertiary care center? You've got to know the mission of the hospital before you sign up, because that mission has to be in line with your personality. And if it's not, it's ego dystonic. It's outside of your ego, and it interferes. So that's the first thing. We'll go to the right, what's called a TOO. That's not two. You have to learn the term TOO, which is table of organization. And most docs get very frustrated. They say, I got somebody who didn't even graduate as much as I graduated in education telling me what to do. Well, you're in what's called a table of organization in this hospital. And maybe that person who's telling you what to do is their job to remind you what to do. And if they weren't there, maybe you wouldn't know that. And if you don't know the table of organization of how your hospital works, how your department works, how the operating room works, sometimes you think something's broken in the OR and you say, and before you throw it across the room and hit somebody, you say, get this fixed. Well, maybe you're giving it to the wrong person. Maybe it's not the scrub tech. Maybe it's the circulating nurse. Or, you know, maybe toss it to the anesthesiologist and wake them up from reading Field and Stream. I don't know. But you've got to know the table of organization. For example, in our hospital, clinically, I report to the chief medical officer, but business-wise, I report to the chief operating officer. And that's important to know, because I will not have financial discussions with one person, and I will not have clinical discussions with another person. And so I know my table of organization in our hospital, okay? Let's go down to the yellow area. You live in what I call an A and B world. You live in an A and B world. So anyone who has done billing and knows it, part A is hospital collections, part B are physician collections. Too many physicians join hospitals or join an employed environment, and all they care about is the part B, what they're getting paid. But your value to the hospital is, of course, always clinically treating the patients in the community, and there's no question about that. But your financial value is really the part A. What are you bringing in for the hospital? You could do 700 rotator cuffs, and you could average $4,000 a rotator cuff, and you use company X and they're charging $3,800 for the implant, so you're making $200 a case times 700. You know, you're not living in a realistic world of understanding your value, okay? So you have to get involved very much with cost savings. You have to be involved with helping to negotiate managed care contracts. You have to, and I'll tell you, hospitals who have employed physicians, most of the time, adore physicians who get involved and say, I'd like to help with the managed care contracting in my specialty. I've noticed that the part A and the part B are a little lower inconsistent. So involve yourself in helping the hospital improve the part A and part B, because it'll improve your value to your employer, okay? And your value, okay, really has to do with your outcomes divided by your cost. That is how value is. Then part of your outcomes are financial outcomes, okay, your revenue. Let's go to the green. You absolutely need strong leadership in your department. I've seen a number of employed models where all the physicians and all the departments answer to a medical officer that runs the physician group. The orthopedists, in my opinion, need to report to orthopedic surgeon. That orthopedic surgeon may report to that next higher up person, but if you're going to take an employed job in orthopedics, make sure your direct person who you answer to is an orthopedic surgeon. Because to quote from the play Hamilton, you want to be in the room. You want to be in the room. That's where the sausage is made and the game is played. Now, if you have good leadership, that leader is going to be in the room helping make policy. But if all of you, we don't have as orthopedic surgeons a tremendous amount in common necessarily with the pediatricians and the primary care doctors in various areas. There are colleagues in the big as employees, but you need strong orthopedic. And I wouldn't join an employed environment if the chief of orthopedics is just a figurehead to make the schedule and the call schedule. That person has to have a role in the management of the hospital. Okay, I feel very, very strongly about that. And the last part I call the remember why category. First of all, remember why you went into medicine. So it may be a little frustrated that you don't have a scribe and your friend down the block in private practice has a scribe. You didn't go into medicine to get a scribe. You went into medicine to treat patients, okay? And there's other whys. Remember why you took that job with that hospital. Remember when you got the contract, you looked at it, there were reasons. So don't forget all the whys that you exist, and it'll be much less frustrating. You're part of your, let me go to the next slide, which I think is a little bit clearer. Okay, so this is how I view employed physicians. I think surgeons are thoroughbreds, absolute finest specimens of animals you're ever going to come across. They are thoroughbreds, but I'm the chairman of the department. You got to run on somebody's racetrack. You can't run wild. You know, a lot of people, when they're in solo private practice, they're thoroughbreds and they own the racetrack. So you can do what you want. But now you're running on someone else's racetrack. Now, every once in a while, they got to modify the racetrack. You're not on the same racetrack as a cardiologist or as a pediatrician, and maybe the spine surgeon's on a different racetrack than the foot surgeons. But you got to understand that if a hospital's got a smart, view surgeons as thoroughbreds, but they got to run on a racetrack. They can't run wild through the woods. Now on the bottom, since I'm only 3 train stops from Yankee Stadium, you'll see where you are. You are Aaron Judge if you're the surgeon. You're the superstar. But this is a table of organization. Hal Steinbrenner owns the Yankees. That's the hospital CEO. And every once in a while, I have a conversation with someone in administration, COO or CEO, and they say, well, we want to do it this way. And I say, well, it's your stadium. You know, we'll do it that way, but this is my advice. I'm Brian Cashman. I'm the general manager. Okay. I'm the department chair. I have to hire administrators. I have to hire Aaron Judge, you know. The managers, which are the department administrators, that's Aaron Boone. They're going to run and make your life easier day to day. You know, Aaron Boone tells Aaron Judge, move 4 feet to the left because this guy is up. Aaron Judge doesn't say, hey, I'm the right fielder. Don't tell me what to do. No, he listens to the administrator because they're hopefully doing predictive analytics and helping you out. So this is kind of how I look at the overall employment. Okay. And my last slide is something I've talked about for years at conferences. These are the 6 things that motivate every orthopedic surgeon. And I've copyrighted this for no apparent reason and no value at all. There are 6 things that motivate every orthopedic surgeon. Doing the right thing, making money, marketing your practice, power, glory, and ego, covering your ass, and going home. That's it. Those are the 6. Your goal, not your goal, your boss's goal is to figure out what your profile is. Maybe you're 1 out of 5 and making money. You're a 5. You're a 3, but going home you're a 5. Maybe you don't care about going home. Maybe you're, you know, it's not a big deal for you, but you really want to make a lot of money, or you want to spend more time marketing your practice. Or you want to produce a lot of academic papers. That's group 4, power, glory, and ego. Or you're really freaky about defensive medicine. So everybody gets a profile, and it's your employer's responsibility to maximize the happiness of your life based on your profile, because you're all not the same. That's why all my docs in the department, all the docs that work for me and my colleagues in the department, don't exactly have the same deal. There's some special maneuvering because I know this one likes this more than others like that. So knowing the profile is important for the leadership. Knowing your own profile will also know what you want to ask for. Because sometimes you may want to ask for, if you power, glory, and ego, instead of asking for a raise, you may ask for a research assistant. And they'll be maybe more than too happy to give you that if that's a big thing for you. Going home, maybe you may get a couple of extra vacation days in your negotiation. But know who you are through this grid in this way. And I think that's the last slide in that. And I always like to kind of bounce off of questions and expand more on that. So I'll stop the share now. This is Joey.pub. I have to give credits to Vinod Dasa, who nicknamed it Joey, Journal of Orthopedic Experience Innovation. So I'll do that. So that's the summary of the core 5 things, the thoroughbred analogy, and the 6 things that motivate every orthopedic surgeon. You know, in 3 slides, it's all there, maybe.
I love it. Fantastic. And one is concise. That's probably the best slide deck I've seen a surgeon put together, because usually they're like 50, 60 slides. So like kudos to you. You set a new record. And it's very rare that I take screenshots of slides because they're so good and hilarious, but I did that with 2 of them. So
Yeah,
I
thank you.
love it. I love it. So we already got some questions. So now everybody, this is the best part of the show. Ask your question. So we do have one question that came in. We're going to start with that one. But if you're brave, and I'm sure that we have some brave people in the audience, if you go to the emojis at the bottom, click it and click raise hand, because then I'll bring you on live. You don't have to have video on, but you can I can bring you on live and you can have an actual like discussion with us, which I think is a lot more interesting. So, but let me kick it off first, Dr. Kirschenbaum. So we got the first one from Kush. Great name, by the way. I'm going to say the Kush. So the Kush asks, for a newer graduate from residency, what type of job would you recommend? Hospital employment, large private groups, small private groups, etc. And Kush, if you could be specific and let us know what specialty, and that'd be helpful. But Dr. Kirschenbaum, while he answers, we'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah. So first of all, there's so many things in deciding a new job as a graduate. A lot has to do with location. All right. And I think the first two things are location and what's available. Okay. So you may sit there and say, I want to be in New York, or I want to be in Augusta, Georgia, because that's where my family's from, or that environment. But you're going to have to do two things. You're going to have to look at the location. You have to see what is available at all. So you can't make up one of those five. Each of those five things don't exist in every geographic area. You may say, I want to live in Rochester, and University of Rochester is maybe the dominant group, and everybody works there, or Geisinger Health System, which is pretty dominant in Erie. Or you would go where in Utah into Mountain Health, another huge medical group. And if you want to live in that Utah area, you may not have as many choices, okay? My first recommendation is you pick your first job based on what a friend of mine, Brandon Steiner, who is a sports marketing guru, says. Skills before bills. Make sure you pick your job. The first 4 to 7 years are so important in the development of you as a surgeon. And you can't go into a practice where you're holding hooks for somebody for 3 years. You have to get busy right away, or be given the freedom to get very busy right away. I had that when I went to Kaiser Permanente as my first job, which I really enjoyed the organization. I still do. I think it's a beacon of quality. But I was able to do 300 cases on average each year I was there, which for the first 5 years as someone who's a joint surgeon, that's just a massive experience. You know, one of my colleagues and mentors, Dr. Chit Ranawat, used to say, he said to me one day, we were at dinner, and he said, you have young kids, right, Ira? I said, yeah. I said, the first 6 years of their life is the most important, he said. Make sure you spend a lot of money on the education in the first 6 years. And so I took that analogy to first-year jobs for residents. Your first 6 years will define who you are as a surgeon for the rest of your career. And you'll pivot from that. So number one, I recommend the job that will get you busiest the fastest is in a geographic area you like, gives you the range of money you're interested in, whether it's private practice or whether it's a group practice. I think one of the nicest models are the very, very large groups like Rothman Institute, Ortho Carolina. You know, these groups that are very large because they're run and owned by orthopedic surgeons. So in theory, they should, and they do, they understand the orthopedic mindset. I usually like trying to stay away from a group that is managed and run by non-surgeons, by non-orthopedic surgeons. You know, if you're going to go to community hospital A and all 200 doctors are in the same group answering to the administrator who was the head of the ER, it's not going to be a happy experience for you. They will not understand that you want to get a Rosa or a Navio or a Mako robot or whatever. They will not understand that. So I suggest living with orthopedic surgeons, and it could be a group practice. Like when you come, if you were to come to Bronx Care, I came here 15 years ago, and we had no orthopedic surgeons, first orthopedic practice. We now have 17. And I tell people, you give me 4 years, I will give you a career. All right. If they leave after 4 years, I say to myself, I won and they won, because I get them busy right away. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to we have somebody who raised their hand. I'm going to bring them on in a second. But Dr. Kirschenbaum, just a couple of things I want to highlight just for the audience again, because you had some really valuable pieces of advice that I don't want people to miss. You know, the skills before bills is such a good one. And what I find interesting, again, you know, having gone to medical school and having a father as a surgeon, there's a lot of parallels between going in a career in technology and let's say medicine. So for us, when I talk to young sales and marketing executives, like who are getting ready to, let's say, start in leadership roles or even just start their careers, I tell them, you know, focus first on learning before earning. Because if you go to a place where you're earning a lot of money, like that's great, but you could get commoditized and cannibalize your own career. And I think it's such a good point for physicians. My anecdotal experience, the people that I went to medical school with who go this route of surgery, there's this eagerness of like, hey, I've been working like a dog. I've been getting paid very little money. Now I'm ready to get paid a lot of money. And it's like, you got to be careful with that, because then you might be getting paid a lot of money, but you might be doing more damage to yourself long-term. So your mentor, Chid Rinawa, is that who you mentioned?
Dr. Ranawa.
Yeah, that the analogy of like invest a lot in your kids' first 6 years, you know, in their education, which I'm having my first kid in a few months. So that's super good advice. I think it's a great analogy for physicians as well. So I thought, yeah, that was a fantastic answer. So Ramesh, I'm going to bring you on. You don't have to have your video. If you want to have your video on, you can, but I'm going to allow you to talk. So Ramesh, you can talk right now. Can you hear us?
Yeah, thanks, Omar. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear. And Ramesh, if you could give a little context, like what specialty you're in, as much information as you'd like, you know, but you don't have to tell us everything, but I think the more, the better.
Yeah, thank you. I just came across this on LinkedIn post, so I was curious because most of the doctors are hospital employed. I'm a hospitalist, internal medicine and geriatrics trained. I work closely with orthopedics, with co-management, with hip fractures and stuff. My interest here is, first of all, great presentation. Some of the things that you kind of explained about the racetrack and stuff makes sense. I've been practicing for 6 to 7 years as a hospitalist. Here is what I have a question for. Every time you go to a room, physicians are told the same thing about Medicare reimbursements or whatever, that you're not bringing in enough money. So it's the question. It's a perpetual question. Honestly, the work gets more complicated. Patients are sicker. You're taking more time to document. There are a lot of things that are, as a hospitalist, at least, I have a lot of data work and stuff that I keep adding to bring value, but those don't convert into dollars in terms of Medicare or something, but it brings a huge value in terms of the goodwill for the hospital, making every other specialty have a better quality of life, or even decreasing the length of stay and other metrics that are measurable. But I see a disconnect between the dollar value to the doctor that comes in and works tirelessly and actually putting more than what they can. And nowadays we fancily call it as burnout. But that's my question. How can doctors start putting value to themselves even before, like, if I'm a new graduate right now coming in, I have no idea when I took my first job that how much value I bring to the hospital. I'm just going by the numbers that the hospital presents to you and whether some of the things fit to me. I'm like, hey, I'm a hospitalist. If I'm seeing 15 patients, I know this is the value you get from Medicare or from other insurances, but the additional value that you don't actually see is the things that I bring, and how do I kind of extrapolate that value?
Sure.
I think that
I think it's a great question. I mean, in fact, that would be my question. I'd ask myself that question, and this is how I'd answer it. Number one, in a number of movies, there's a great quote. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist. Okay? The greatest trick anyone in a hospital tells a doctor is telling them they're not bringing in enough money. It's the greatest trick I've ever seen. First of all, let's go back to we don't have to go back. Imagine my original slide. Ramesh, you live in a Part A and Part B world.
Yeah.
If they're just evaluating you on your Part B revenue, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's all about an equation. If Einstein could describe the bending of light around celestial bodies with an equation, we can figure out an equation for the value of a physician. This is easy. So, for example, hip fracture, Medicare, $32,000. You are an important part of that team. $32,000 Part A revenue, hospital revenue, okay? Patient came into the ER, went to the ICU, went to the OR, back to the ICU, back to the floor. You are part of that team that brought in $32,000. Yes, they'll say, but a 99212, which is an inpatient consult, only generated $32, Ramesh, and you only did 60 of these last month. Oh, wait a sec. I was part of the team that did 15 hip fractures. Okay, that's $500,000. I'm part of the $500,000 team. So you change the metrics, and we do that here. We add value to people by, are you part of that team? Everyone in a hospital, including the administrators, who should be your friends, they should not be antagonistic, should live in a Part A, Part B, and cost world. And if you're bringing down cost through length of stay, that's amazing. Okay, and you just have to convince them, in a sense, that, or convince everyone that you're part. Everything you touch, you're part of that Part A, and you're not a commodity if you're good at it. If you're improving length of stay and decreasing complications and decreasing readmission rates. So I would have to say readmission rates are on the shoulders of hospitalists and orthopedic surgeons. Length of stay, surgical site infections. These are all things that if you have low surgical site infections, low length of stay, and low readmission rate, those metrics need to go in to the equation of your value, not the Medicare dollars. Part B dollars, I mean, I work in an area which is Medicaid HMOs, which really pay about $9 to the doctor for an office visit. Is that our value? Because Medicaid pays $27,000 for a hip replacement. Why? You just look at, so if you're hired by the hospital, you're part of the Part A as well. So you live in an A, B, and cost world. Does that help?
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question on that. Sorry. So why are we not putting that economic numbers to the hospital physicians? I don't see a research. There is a vague data about all these things, trying to ask people to figure it out. And then those numbers are not open to you when you're in a hospital system.
Well, they're not open to you. Are you the head of the hospitalist?
No, I am not.
So you got to get the head of the hospitalist to do that job. Just like I'm the chief of orthopedics or chair of orthopedics, I have to do that job because the hospital has to know the value, not so they like us so much, so they know the value. I mean, there isn't a CEO in the world who doesn't want to know the value of people who work for them. I mean, Elon Musk, you think he says, oh, I don't care about the value of people who work for me. Jeff Bezos, I don't care about them. Of course they do. Okay, so you have to get your chairman or your chief, the hospitalist, to lead that charge. As an individual, I wouldn't give this information to any of my individual doctors. I would gather it myself and discuss it with the hospital and ask the question to my hospital administration, how can we offer even better value with this? Here's 9 data points. How, now that we know these data points, which ones are you interested in? And how can I make it better on your terms? And that's the role of the leadership. Poor leadership is the failure of hospital employment. And I'm talking, yeah.
Sorry. In the ideal world, I would agree with you, having a hospitalist chief who has those numbers and in the good interest of bringing the both parties to look and actually help to grow. I am all for it. And I'm just talking the general sense nationally. It could vary from an academic institution like Harvard. Harvard has probably everything figured out versus a rural hospital.
They complain there too at MGH and the Brigham there.
So my thing is, like, at some point we should have a national data of, like, you are a fresh graduate entering into the world of negotiating a contract with a hospital who has more knowledge, more data, and also has more. It's a unfair negotiation between a big institution and a graduate coming out with zero or probably minimal financial knowledge. Personally, and also in the Medicare world, that makes it a really unfair negotiation.
Yeah,
if there
well,
is a,
you know, it may not be, it's not that it's not fair, it just may not be equitable. And nor is it equitable if I was to fight Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, you know, but I got to figure something out. Well, let's move on to the next question.
okay, cool.
Perfect.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I have your next question here. And something I was going to mention, Dr. Kirschenbaum, maybe this is something where I could help physicians. I've always wanted, because they don't teach this. No one teaches, even in sales, no one teaches persuasion frameworks. And I think that what physicians often make the mistake of doing, because this is how we're trained, is we need data, we need studies, all these things. And a lot of times persuasion doesn't work that way. And so I think maybe the next webinar I should probably do and make it a CME as well is basics on persuasion, because I think physicians who actually learn how to use persuasion, it would make this stuff a lot easier. I'm gonna do that next. And Ramesh, thank you for asking that great question. So next question, Bruce has a great question. Bruce, do you want to raise your hand and come on live? I'd love to bring you on live, but if not, I'm just gonna read your question. So I'll give you a second to. All right. See, I love this. See, I love doctors. I can always rely on them. All right, Bruce, I'm bringing you on live. Here we go. All right, Bruce, you're on live. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Dr. Kirschenbaum.
Hey, Hi, Bruce. And Bruce, before you ask your question, just a quick shout out, Dr. Kirschenbaum, because since you're on video, I just want to make you flustered a little bit. Joy Maldonado, thank you very much. She says, yes, Dr. Ira is amazing. Thank you for this. We love him. So thanks for the nice comment, Joy. All right. Now that I've embarrassed Dr. Kirschenbaum, Bruce, go ahead.
Dr. Kirschenbaum, I have been a long-time student of your 6 motivators. My continued challenge has always been how to convince CEOs that they even have a track or what the 6 motivators are. Right. They're playing in a totally different world than me. How do I teach them?
Wow. So it may take a few years, and it may take a number of dinners, and it may take a number of meetings, and it may take also a number of incremental successes that prove your point. I feel, trust is a function of previous experience. And while you think you might have succeeded at what their business plan is, you may be a little off the mark to some extent. Now, of course, you can never win if you have someone running your health system who feels that doctors are just a commodity. I mean, that's just, I have no advice on that. But I'm just going to assume that the areas that you're working in are people who have not been enlightened and seen another way to do it. I mean, so incremental victories often mean that you say, all right, I'm doing 700 joints this year. Let's look at the Part A and let me see if I can help you negotiate better contracts. And if you do that, there's a little shit in your pocket, and now you can go on to the next one. But I do think this, the key is, it's very hard if you don't have a, it's like the Wizard of Oz. What separated people, the scarecrow goes up and says, you don't have a brain. The thing you're missing is a diploma. So sometimes I think in hospitals, you need someone who has a title. I really do. And if an orthopedic group of 5 people walk up to the CEO, none of you have a title. You're orthopedic guys. I get it. But if there needs to, that's why I think in the ideal model, or in many models, you have a chair who is the one who interfaces with the CEO. And that brings up Omar's point of persuasion. 5 orthopedic surgeons with 16 different plans in their own minds. That's 5 times 16. I can't even do that math. Okay, it's 80, but I can't even do that math. He's just hearing, he or she, they're just hearing wah, 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 wah. But if one of you were the people who was saying, okay, Bruce is our chairman. Bruce is our chief. Bruce does all the talking to the CEO. We'll speak with one voice. That is extremely helpful. There are some areas, some places that are intractable. I will tell you that right now. But there is no, whether it's a large tenant HCA or a community hospital with a CEO, no CEO, every CEO wants patients to be healthy, patients to be treated efficiently, no mistakes, no errors, high value, good money, good value for the patients, and want to stay in business. They want to be in a block. There's no question. But I think you need, as Omar said, you need that relationship. Everything that you negotiate is about relationships. And again, if you've done 9 things for the hospital, those 9 things need to translate into some value for you as well, eventually. All right, easier said than done in some intractable situations, but I think if you go in as a group, it's game over. When my attendings talk to me in grand rounds and they're all complaining at the same time, I love it. I got no complaints. I walk out, what they say? I said, I don't know what they say. But when they come and see me individually, or someone comes in representing a complaint they have about the clinic, I am laser focused on what that person is saying. Okay. How did I dodge the question, Bruce? Pretty good?
Masterfully as always. Thank you.
Awesome, Bruce. Thank you so much for coming on. Great question. All right, another question by Jeff Wint. I sent a message to Jeff. Jeff, do you want to come on live? It's always better with live, but let me give Jeff a second. If you want to come on live, just click the hand raise button. But let me set it up real quick, and then we'll see. There we go, man. See, I'm going to use this webinar as an example to my industry, because when I do these webinars with my industry, the salespeople, marketing people, they're very shy. With doctors, look, I just say, hey, you want to come on live? There's the hand raise. Jeff Wint, you're coming on live. All right, Jeff, you are live. Go ahead and ask your question. You're going to have to unmute yourself. That I cannot do.
Are you still on mute, Jeff?
You're still on mute. While he's looking for the unmute button.
I think I got it. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I'm still a little technology challenged, so.
You really, so it's all good.
Yeah. So my comment was, I love the slides. And I really appreciate all the examples. In fact, you've answered a lot of my questions already just by the conversation from the two previous questioners. But I just was curious, from your experience, some pearls, some strategy pearls. How do you deal with someone who is in your organizational chain who maybe is not necessarily on board with what you're on board with, whether it be looking at your six, which I love, your six-sided goals. I love that slide. I hadn't seen it before, but I did take a picture of it as well. Or just in general, because you're always going to find that, and you're going to butt heads with people. And I tend not to be a good head butter, and I think that's been my undoing. I've learned a lot, mellowed as I got a little older, but I would appreciate some advice.
Jeff, for context, can you provide your background specialty wise?
I'm an orthopedic trained hand surgeon. I'm in private practice, but I have a couple of employers. So I have kind of part-time employment at one big organization and one large hospital organization. So I kind of have a hybrid practice in that way.
Got it.
It's everything is a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation. And everything is negotiable. And when you go in there and there are things you want, the things you don't want. I just wrote a chapter for the AAOS resident curriculum on contracts and negotiations. And so I better negotiate well, or else they'll probably throw out the chapter. But, when you go into any ask situation, a situation where you're going to ask that, you need to write 3 columns down. Column 1 are the deal breakers. Column 3 are the things you really don't give a crap about. And in the middle of a plus minus you prefer to get. Okay? Now, you don't tell the other person which one is in which column, because the most important thing to them may be in your column 3 you don't care that much about. So you may give some concessions early. For example, they may sit there and say, well, we don't really pay extra for ER call. Okay? And maybe your community ER call is not busy. So you say, you say to them, well, that's really important to me, but in reality, it's not that important to you. What you really want are 2 rooms in the OR. Okay? So you can bop from room to room. You'll say, listen, I'll tell you what. I hear you that, but I really need 2 rooms in the OR and I need money in the ER. I'll give you the ER if you give me the OR. That's a simple example, a soft example. But everything has to be about understanding who's on the other side of the table and what their needs are and what your needs are. And sometimes there's a Venn diagram where they overlap. The overlap area is filled with unmet opportunity. I find that all the time. I mean, someone wants something on the left, someone on the right, and the middle stuff that they agree on, they're not even capitalizing on that together. So the first advice is, whatever you agree on, run with that, get some feedback on that, and then whatever you want after that, you set it up as a negotiation. Now, I'd like to hear your response to what I said, and if I hit the answer right, Jeff.
Well, no, I think those are good examples. It's hard abstractly. I just think of different scenarios where I've been negotiating salary or negotiating call, or the example you said, or lost an OR room. So those are all perfect examples. I think sometimes the problem is, I think as surgeons, we want it all. We think we deserve it all at the same time. So that's the hard part. And any little erosion of that is maybe not handled well. And so but that's a great idea. The 3 columns thing is great. Is that something that you came up with, or is that something well known in organizations?
No, that's well known in a lot of negotiating books.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been in the book Getting to Yes by the Harvard Negotiation Consortium.
And I got that right here.
Yeah, there it is. I think
I might even read books like that, but it's just like, how much time you have during the day. So I want the quick and dirty, but that's good.
Yeah, the 3 column I love.
And Jeff, I was going to say, again, one of my goals is that I have a soft spot for physicians, and I'm always trying to help them out, especially like making more money. I think I'm going to do a webinar. I'm going to do a webinar just on like high level persuasion tactics and everything, but just to kind of give you something to think about, I would look up Cialdini's 6 Principles of Persuasion. That's a really good foundation to start with. Just look it up online. And the other thing to keep in mind is that when you're trying to persuade somebody, to Dr. Kirschenbaum's point, when you negotiate, one is looking for something that's going to be truly a win-win. I mean, the best FBI and terrorist negotiators actually talk about empathy in negotiation, which is surprising. So that's one side, but one trick or tactic, and you can use this at work, you can use this on your family with their, like your spouse, your kids or whoever. Tell them who you want them to be before you're asked. So when I negotiate salary, or when I, advise people in my industry negotiate salary, tell the other person who you want them to be, such as, hey, I know you're a very fair person and you see the value that I bring, and you want to make sure that I have a fair salary. So here's the salary. And usually I tell people go 10, 15, 20% more, and they usually get it. So telling the person who you want them to be is actually persuasive. And as silly as these things sound, they actually do work. They really do work.
Sounds good. Sounds
Perfect.
good. Any, and if you, I'll get off after this, but what I also want to know is, I want to know what the other people haven't read, but that's the tough part, right? What someone else has not, what, in other words, I'm negotiating with you, you've read all this, you know it's coming. But
yeah, and I'll comment on this very quickly, and I'll move to the next question. So if anybody has any more questions, you can submit in the Q&A, but raise your hand. I'd love to bring you on. And Jeff, I'm just going to take you off for a second, or I'll take you off in a moment. In terms of reading, so as you guys see, this is not a background. This is my actual library. I've read, not all of them. I've read a lot of books on persuasion negotiation. Even when I'm in the middle of it and I kind of know what's happening, I still get persuaded. So that's the thing about this, is that people can have read this. It takes a lot of mental energy and effort to not fall into these sort of persuasion tricks when you're in the middle of it. That's what I say. And I would put money on it that 9 out of 10 times of the people that you're dealing with have never read these books. And even if they had some training in persuasion, they might have read a book or two like many, many years ago. Most people do not spend time learning this stuff. So
I would like to comment that sincerity is very important as well, because
absolutely,
if you use one of these things as a tactic, one of the great negotiating dictums is, a tactic perceived is no longer a tactic anymore. So if they know you're using a maneuver, it's game over. They know you're just using a maneuver. I mean, sincerity, and you brought up the money thing about asking for a raise. So I have 17 surgeons, which means 654 times a year I get asked about raises. Okay. And that's, and one of the first things I say is, where am I going to get the money from? Where am I going to get the money from? From the state budget? We're not on the state. What are you going to do for me? What you did 203 cases. I'm making this up. 203 cases last year that brought in this. You didn't spend any time with the vendor to negotiate the prices down. Let's talk about what I want you to do if we were to give you a raise. And if you do this, we'll deliver that. Because this is what I need. I need length of stay to go down to 2 days. I need the implant prices to go down 30%. I need you to do 320 cases, not 201. You willing to do that, or you just want to ask for a raise? But you think you're worth more. And everyone should think they're worth more. It's a noble thing, but you're dealing with somebody else's purse strings. All right.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much.
thank you.
All right. So let's see. I know there's a question, but I'm going to read it. So Joy Maldonado says, I'm a big fan of audible books since I'm very busy, big fan of Stoics and Enlightenment. Our industry is very difficult and mentally challenging. Also, I absolutely agree with Dr. Ira. He is beloved because he is transparent in his intentions. It is important to be kind, to listen, and have empathy for others. Yeah, absolutely true. And again, like as big of a fan I am of Persuasion, you can't use it as like a tactician, because you're just going to come off like a jerk and people see that. So I think sincerity is extremely important. I think we've answered all the questions, Dr. Kirschenbaum. I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. Do you have a, okay, perfect. So one of the things that I was going to ask, and I think some of them couldn't attend. I know there was a lot of residents and fellows that really wanted to attend. Something that is never talked about, and people are not trained, and they make really, really bad mistakes starting off their career. I think, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but your point about your first 6 years out of residency or fellowship, that's really going to define you. I think as a physician, period. And I think that once you're graduating, people fall into all kinds of cognitive biases, whether it's let's say an authority bias, which is they go and they want to work at a big name hospital, or they get swooned by a lot of money or something. So people make these mistakes. What are some key pieces of advice to the residents or fellows who are going to watch this, who are getting ready to graduate and they're about to, let's say, sign a contract? What would you tell them to be wary of, to do in this process?
I think the first thing is I got to figure out an answer to the question. That's the first thing. No, I think honestly, you have to imagine who you are going to be 6 years from now. You have to sit down and visualize that person. You know, your lawyer who does your first contract, useless. He or she can't give you any advice. It's just, you might as well call me on a slow Tuesday. You know, I actually, when my last contract I gave to one of my attendings, his lawyer had like a bunch of questions, wanted to speak to our lawyer. I said, why don't you speak to me first? I'll save our lawyer some money. I told him what was negotiable, what wasn't. But the question you have to ask is, imagine yourself 6 years from now, like in life, personal, professional, financial. You want to be that person who buys 16 homes and has 7 divorces? You could do that. You want to be that person? Just get that in your mind. And then look at the contract and say, does this contract, do these terms, does this hospital, will that get me to be that person? And another thing you can do is look at other people in the practice and say, do I want to be any of them? And if the answer is no, it doesn't matter what's on the contract. It doesn't matter what's on the contract. So you got to imagine who you want to be. And you have to look at role models who are in that situation and say, I want to be that guy who's in the practice. Because he or she, they didn't get there overnight. They've been in practice 15, 18 years. You know, they think it happens once you get there, you think it happens overnight. So imagine who you want to be, and also look for someone who's in that situation as that's who I'm going to be.
I think that's such extremely good advice. And I think many times we don't do that, which is to think about a contract or a job as a vehicle to take us to a destination of who we're going to become. And I think that's such a valid point. And one thing I would say, just my advice to residents, because I see this happening, it doesn't matter what industry, whether it's, you know, surgery or tech exec, is that we start to desire things that other people desire. And that deep down inside, intuitively, we really don't want that. So you might think, let's say that you want to, let's say, build a huge private practice or be the chair at a certain hospital or anything. But in reality, you're desiring those things because some people around you are desiring them. And I think really spending time to reflect, who do you want to be and what is your personal life and professional life look like 6 years from now? A lot of physicians don't consider this, but some of them have aspirations to, let's say, write books, create a podcast, you know, do things that are a little bit outside of clinical practice. They have to take that into account. That is my contract going to allow me to do that? Would you agree with that, Dr. Kirschenbaum?
Yeah.
I feel like this is a new thing.
My contract when I came here, I was very involved with many inventions and new ideas, actually was a little different than some of the other chairmen. It actually had a buy on intellectual property from me, you know, because that was important to me, that things that I invented or have already invented, and they were okay with that. All right. Other things you'll see. So you got to know yourself And will this contract or will this job catapult you to that person who, as you pointed out so well, Omar, who you really want to be? A person is, I want to be the person who makes $8 million. That's not a person. That's a number and a goal. Okay? That's not a person. You want to do that, go onto Wall Street tomorrow. Go into private equity tomorrow. Because all they care about is making it known. Now, if you want to be that guy who has a busy practice, that woman or guy who has a busy practice, who's respected in the community, who's a pillar, those are the goals you strive for. And I assure you the money follows. The money
Absolutely.
follows when you become the person who you want to be.
I think that's so right. And I think the money, there's nothing wrong with having, I have, specific numbers and revenue goals for myself in mind. That's not the end though. That's really just the means to the end. Right. And
Yep.
I think that's focusing on like, okay, what is this going to get me to and who am I going to become at the end of this? I think is the most important question. So let's see. I think we've covered all the questions. I'm going to give it one more chance. Everyone, if there's one more question you want to ask, I'm going to allow one more because I know we're a little bit over time. So drop it in the Q&A box or in the chat or raise your hand. So going once, going twice, don't be shy. And let's see. All right. No more questions. Dr.
Okay.
Kirschenbaum, thank you so much for your time. Everyone, thank you very much for joining. I'm going to do more of these. I think I'll do one on persuasion just for physicians because a lot of people have asked me to do that. This webinar, if you watched it live or even on demand, keep in mind, you will get a AMA PRA category 1 credit from this. I'm going to email everybody the link. All you got to do is click the link and spend 30 seconds, 60 seconds, just writing some key points that you learned. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and wonderful weekend.